We'll go straight to the point because I believe we have the largest panel here, and so they've given us about 3 hours for this session. We have a good mix of speakers, people who represent both the enterprise side and the people who are representing the funder side. And I think they really got me as a moderator because I have no idea what this session was about. So I really can't say too much about it. So anyway, let me just briefly introduce the people from the social enterprise side. We'll just, I guess, call everybody by their first name. Korawit, Reese, and Kathy. And then from the mentor side, we have Diane, and Terry, and Pranay. Okay, so we have perspectives from both sides of the funding table. But let me begin with the social entrepreneurs. The idea here is we want to give tips to other potential entrepreneurs, how you could potentially raise equity or find investors, and also give tips to those who are investing, how they can find a good enterprise to invest. Okay, that was just in my script, I really know nothing. So let me begin with the far left. What do you think in your own enterprise? What was your experience in terms of raising funds? What was important in helping you do that successfully? And let's keep our answers to about 10 seconds. So go ahead.
Okay, actually Socialgiver haven't raised fund, but we have different revenue models in terms of we got sponsorship, we got partnership from different brands that support us. We have a raise fund because we're pretty cautious about taking the fund, and we're planning to do ICO, initial public offering, which is kind of different part of raising fund, different from like taking fund from VC or angel investor. So I think that's about 10 seconds. Thumbs up.
Okay, in some time zone that might be 10 seconds, okay. Reese?
Yeah, so we've had extensive experience in working with different kinds of investors and funders for the past 10 years. And what I would say is that you'd have to know what kind of money you're searching for the kind of scale that you want, for the kind of business model you have. So it's a very long way of saying it depends, which is not helpful, but it's really true. You have to really understand your business model and where you want to go before you get the money in. Because the money doesn't come for free, obviously. But it doesn't just come in as cash, it also comes in as advice and direction, and you have to make sure that those are the right choices for your life and for your enterprise.
Okay, thank you. Business model, and Kathy.
We're actually a very typical startup in China. So I remember I had a conversation with Professor Jeffrey. If he's sitting in this audience, he will let you know, well, in China, startup is all about speed. So how to expand that speed is you got to raise money, equity fast. So we actually, I consider myself pretty good at raising funds, because in the previous, I consider myself as a serial entrepreneur. In all the previous startups we have raised a serious rounds of funds. So my advice will be, I think raising money as a pitch, it's a problematic fundamentally. We need to change that mentality. It's not change the mentality of dating mentality. It's like you show your best side, you hide your problems, and it's first date mentality to the marriage mentality. Because this is someone, a partner, you're gonna live through the lifetime of your enterprise at least.
Okay, I think it's an interesting analogy to marriage mentality. I hope the marriages go well, right? But let's go to the other side of the coin. We've heard how they've done it, what's important to them. On your side, what would you advise social enterprises? What are important to you, maybe on the funding side, or what would you advise? Let me begin with Diane.
Well, for IdeaSpace, because we're one of the very early funders for early stage startups. In fact, what they call our money is adventure capital. Because before they can find a business model, before they can really gain traction, IdeaSpace comes in and provides resources. So from our perspective, it's really clarity of why you're doing it. And if you're able to convince us why you're doing it, then most likely you'll be able to convince other people to try the product and to also pay for it. And so clarity of why is important.
Okay, and Terry?
I think to add to what Diane said is you also need to look at the team, to look at who's behind after the why. Do they have the capability? Do they have the ability to execute it? So I think that would be the second question that I would ask.
Okay. Last but not least.
Like you saw, I think I would probably echo what I've heard on the entrepreneur side. Number one, be very clear about your business model. The clearer you are, the easier it becomes. And you find supporters along the way. So don't just think of it as investment capital. There's different types of partnerships and support you can find. And the second point is you think of it as a marriage. I would definitely echo that. This is somebody who you're going to partner with in the longer term. The clearer you are as an entrepreneur about what you want to achieve, who would be the right kind of partner for you, that makes it that much easier.
Okay, you know the good thing is there's many similarities between both sides. But you're coming from a more of a business oriented where you expect ROI and we expect our investors to think about returns on investment, cash flow, and all of this stuff. Is it the same thing for you guys? Is that what your investors are looking for?
Okay, I believe it's pretty much the same. Actually, for us, we are social startup, social enterprise and startup, because at the backbone of our company is a technology platform. We run as an e-commerce platform and fundraise to different charities. So, business people, investors, they look at us as another startup. But usually, the investor that interested in investing in our startup is usually they are like impact investor. They not only the return side, they are also interested in the impact of the company, right? So most of the time is similar to normal startup, but there is a social aspect that adding on to social enterprise. That's my opinion.
Do you two agree? Is it both impact and return on investment?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work with artisans. Our company is called Rags to Riches, or R2R, and we're a fashion and design house empowering community artisans in the Philippines. So, of course, since we sell products, that's definitely one of the growth in revenue, the profitability, the cash flow, all of the nice ratios that are needed. But also, in addition to that, the number of artisans that we're able to partner with and how they're really supported. So the metrics are much more complicated, and sometimes it may seem that the metrics are in conflict with one another. Because, okay, what will come first? The social first or the profit first? So there's a lot of balancing that you have to do. And so you have to do it collaboratively so that you can manage all expectations. And the more people you have in your organization, the more investors you have, the more expectations you have to manage as well.
Well, for us, actually, we just closed our last round. Last round we raised funds from this two largest, because of our game company, two largest game company in China, one being Tencent. So you can imagine how demanding. Well, one can imagine how demanding Tencent will be. But actually, I think it's about managing expectations, but also it's also, of course, even as a game company, game is one of the most competitive, most mobilized and focus on monetization business. But also it's any business, especially you need to grow fast, it comes with impact. And there's definitely, whether it's on the social side, whether it's on the business side, the impact. So that's how we see game as it's, especially nowadays, the identity, one's identity is it's very blurred. It's what is how you define online identity, how you define offline identity. So that's how we see the game that being impactful to the society. So there is definitely ROI, the business returns on the number side, and also the impactful side.
Okay, so it's a balance of the usual investment ratios and impact. But are there trade-offs involved? Let me ask you guys. Let me ask Pranay. Is there a trade-off? What happens if the impact is great and the return is little, or vice versa?
So I just like to take a step back. So the investors, there's a huge spectrum of investors and their return expectations. You have, so not counting grant capital, you have everybody from people who want to protect capital to people who want to achieve double-digit returns to people who want to expect higher than double-digit returns. On the spectrum, I think you have to know your investor. In the impact space, there is a movement away from the question of profit maximization. I think that's the key point. In a traditional investment model, you would look at sustainable but profit maximization. So longer term returns, but also profit maximization. I think that the key thing on impact, and every impact enterprise I know has gone through this question of trade-off. At some stage it always comes up. It shouldn't be that impact substitutes, is an excuse for bad business decisions. I think that's the key thing. It should not be used to move away from something that is inherently sustainable to something that's unsustainable, because the chance that we have is to get scale through the social enterprise model only comes about if financial sustainability happens first. So you start with your mission, and then after that, everything is about financial sustainability. Whether it's profit maximization, I think that's where there are investors who are willing to take that trade-off.
But would you be demanding the same levels of profitability or investment as you would a non-social media?
And I think the investors that we know, there's a growing movement towards people who say we're okay with taking lower returns as long as we believe that the impact is happening. So again, for every entrepreneur, tracking your impact data is crucial, understanding your impact, because the stronger impact story you have, the easier it is to find an investor who's willing to make that trade-off.
Okay, if you could give us some of the phone numbers and names of these investors afterwards. Yes, Terry, what do you want to say?
If we look at the history of impact investing, if you go back to the last 15 years, US and Europe have been really the leaders on impact investing. I would say in India 15 years ago, impact investing really took off in Asia. In the last 10 years, if you look at families in wealth, and as they've moved into family offices, they've gone from philanthropy to more sophisticated and philanthropy on sustainability. We've seen in the last 10 years a transformation. So we have to do something that's sustainable, and that's where we started to see all of the organizations and companies like we see here move forward. So if you look at the investors, like an investor here in the Philippines will be very different than a Singaporean, where Singaporeans for the last 10 years have been told by their bankers, hey, you should take 5% of your total investment and put it into social impact, move some of your philanthropy aside. We have to do the same thing here in the Philippines. We have to educate the investors. I think one of the great things with IdeaSpace and AIM is that we work very closely with the organizations and teaching and helping them, but we have to do the same thing with the bankers, helping to educate the philanthropists and the person on the street who's saying, hey, I want to invest, to understand, because right now they don't. Philanthropy is philanthropy, investing is investing. How do we get them to understand? And one lady, Anna Chen in Hong Kong, 15 years ago, she went through this whole process. Today she's a champion, but she had to understand the process.
Educating bankers, kind of difficult, right?
No, it can be done. Can be done.
Okay, Diane, on that?
May I add, actually for us, because we're involved in the very early stage, to look at profit, it's really something we have to look at maybe 15, 20 years, or maybe the earliest 7 years before the startup really turns out some profit. But what we look into is not investing in startups and the success rate of the startup, but looking at investing in people. Because when their startups fail, the amount of knowledge this person learns in failing is tremendous. In fact, our chairman, Mr. Pangilinan, always says it's the best time to fail, when you're young and there's so much to learn. And indeed, we have so many stories of startups who have failed. But say that the experience of going through an enterprise, of carrying everything on your back, there's nothing like it. I have so many stories of intrapreneurs who join our competition and join our program, and after 6 months they said, oh, this startup thing, it's not for me. I'm gonna go back to corporate. And we've seen young men and women who started out as supervisors in companies like Maynila and PLDT or Meralco, who go back and then end up their career projection. Their career progression is very, very fast because there's nothing like an executive who's able to network quickly, know how to harness resources throughout the organization. So it is investing in people that we should look at more than just really investing in startups.
What's your value proposition first and foremost? If you understand who your customer is and what value you're providing them, it means there's an embedded understanding within that you understand your sector, you understand the value chain, you understand the actors within it, you understand who your target customers are. If you understand those fundamental business principles, again, these are not unique to the impact space. This is something that's common across all businesses. But defining your business model comes down to who you're providing value to and how you're delivering that value. It may be in impact terms, it may be in financial terms, but essentially it does come down to your ability as a business to deliver that.
It is a clarity of vision, of mission, not just vision, of mission that everyone seems to be. Well, whether it be helping others or gaming or what providing.
It has to translate to being able to get it onto your customers. I mean, it's part of it. I think the interesting thing about the impact enterprise space is you start off with missions. You do have it. You start off with that clarity of what you want to achieve. But it has to translate to a business model. It has to translate to the ability to get it onto the ability. I mean, it's the equivalent of traction. What's your traction?
Okay, now let's move from mission or model to another point that's brought up, marriage. Let's talk a little bit about marriage. What would you guys be looking for in a spouse? No, in a partner investor. If you're choosing a group to invest, as mentioned here, would it be stewardship? Would it be network? Would it be wisdom? What would you be looking for in an ideal partner?
As I mentioned, for our startup, partnership is the key.
Sorry.
Partnership is the key for our startup because we are just a small startup that works with big companies, big brands, both in listed companies and small and medium-sized hotels. So, of course, for ideal investor, we would like to have the investor that also are in this space and they have the network and can bring in more services on our platform. And so mainly I think partnership is a key for us.
But what in the partnership would be important, or what would you be looking for specifically? Sometimes we like our partners to say nothing, or we want our partners to share the backbone. I mean, how would you define an ideal partner for you?
Partners who are in this sector already, the tourism, travel sector, and they can connect us to other brands. They can invite us to grow our supply side of the company. And also, of course, the partner that can also help us on the demand side of the company. So, because basically on Socialgiver, people shop, right, at a good price, and then the money go to support charities. But we can only do this because we have the green partners. These businesses, hotel, restaurant, activities, they give away their spare service capacity on our platform. So the key factor of the company is to have these services lined up for people to shop. And the ideal investor who will bring more services, who can grow our platform, and of course, like in the end, it will create a bigger social impact fundraise to different charities that we support.
Okay, Reese?
Yeah, so the most important thing in partnership or in marriage or in any friendship is values alignment, hands down. So, because everything else, the skills you could get from somewhere else, but if you're not values aligned, it will be very difficult moving forward. So like in my marriage, I have that. Where's my husband? You should be hearing this. And in investors, that's also very important because in both marriage and business, you will get to different difficult decisions. And there will be really challenging things along the way that will really make you question your principles, your direction. But if your values align, you will always get to a proper discussion, especially if you're in social enterprise or honestly in any enterprise. You have to consider stakeholders. You have to be compassionate when you create or you make the really difficult decisions. So if you have values aligned partners, it will not make it easier, but it will always lead you to the right direction.
Okay, Kathy, you brought it up.
Oh, love, what a complex subject. Too bad I'm not married, so I don't know whether I'm qualified to, but I don't know whether marriage equals to love. So I'll try to. If I think about the partnership with investors, I would say, or I try to imagine a partnership with, in terms of marriage. Of course, value is the first and foremost important thing. They're going to carry a long way. And if value are not shared, there's no fix. Other thing else can be fixed. Besides that, I would say, first of all, it's both sides have something to offer. So it's not only for the investors, it's not only the cash, especially for a good company, golden company, there's not going to be a problem for you to raise funds. You're going to be investors chasing you instead of you chasing them. So besides the cash, I would say, of course, it's other values. So whether it's a mentorship, whether it's a network, whether it's the possibility to expand your markets. Also, I think it's very important if you look at the marriage or look at any partnership, is two parties cannot outgrow each other. Because any marriage, at that side, at that moment you get married, you are a perfect match, otherwise when you get married. But you gradually outgrow each other. Like one side provide more, one side provide less, or one side stop providing, has no value, then that marriage will have some problems. So I think that one is you need to think long term. That's a long term of marriage. Second of all is it's for better or for worse. For better, everyone can do. It's for worse.